Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in Santa Clara, California, 9th Cloud Expo, Silicon Valley. Our final general session of the show here in the main central session room was to have been given by Mathew Lodge, is now going to be given by James Waters. He'll explain the circumstances, still, of course, from VMware, though he's a Cloud Foundry guy. But he is going to give upgrade to a vCloud because that's what you can do at VMware. You know each other's stuff. Let's give it up for James Waters, and he can take it from there.
So I've been told you guys have been through 4 days of cloud conferences, and I guess we're heading into year 4 of cloud. So tip of the hat. What I'm here to talk about today is kind of the future of cloud a bit, and I'm going to wrap it into a message of vCloud. So the circumstances where Matthew's not here today is he got sick and lost his voice. The backstory is that Mathew and I are lunch buddies at VMware. He sits in the office next to me, and I've been working on this prezo with him. And it's somewhat made up of some of the tweets I've sent out over the last 2 years where I've seen flaws with cloud. So that's why I'm up here, not Mr. Lodge, who's got a fine English accent that I lack. So the theme of the talk is that moving to cloud doesn't mean you have to give up on performance, choice, security, some of the things that a data center always gave you. Data centers, Scott McNeely, who used to work for, said were like snowflakes. So the era we came from was data centers were all very heterogeneous, and every application had its own stack, its own team, its own performance engineers. And that's the era we came from, and that was too sludgy, too slow. And we went into, in 2008, an experimental phase with Amazon EC2 where we thought this is the Henry Ford era, and we're going to go from snowflake data centers to Model Ts, and we're going to crank out cheap black cars. And we've all been trying to be as excited as we can about cheap black cars for a while now. But I think if you follow the alpha nerds that are out doing experimental, interesting things in cloud, you'll start to see a few trends. And some of them are starting to say, don't use cloud. And the reason they're doing that is they can't get what they need done with the cheap black car anymore. So these are all the promises, low barrier to entry, etc. These are all the reasons we wanted to try out the cheap black car. This is the reason almost every single one of you has probably done a proof of concept on Amazon today. Here are the problems. Performance. So the canonical example that got cloud really kicked off in, say, I think it was 2008, was a very batch-driven workload. Two things happened. So the New York Times did a Hadoop workload, which was completely batch-driven, and another company did a photo transformation application that was also batch-driven. And for embarrassingly parallel workloads, that cheap black car worked. The other thing is that networking security were also very constrained, and a lot of people's applications don't work in that world either. But none of those applications that were early examples really required that. Uptime compatibility, I don't give people too hard of a time around uptime. It can happen to anyone, but we have had cloud outages. They're very famous. So here's an example of where the alpha nerds are going. You can see this everywhere. My favorite example, Mathew used these guys. My favorite example is a company called Urban Airship. They just got $15 million of funding 2 days ago, and they're a heavy cloud user. And in their latest presentation, they say, don't use cloud. And their exact quote is, EBS hates your database. So if early cloud marketing was hype around scalability, I think the seminal quote of the last year for cloud is, EBS hates your database. It also happened, Reddit said don't use EBS, and even competitor to Cloud Foundry Heroku said don't use EBS. So that's the transformation we went from embarrassingly parallel, where cloud really shined, where if you just want to replace a quick horse run to the market, a plain black car is fine, but now you're trying to do something more complicated. So people are moving off cloud. Highly, highly variable performance. So business people largely have their jobs in IT because they're there to make sure things don't go wrong. I remember my first day as a network engineer, I was looking at a card for a Juniper, and the support contract on it was like $70,000. And I said, we could probably get away with not paying the $70,000, right? And my boss turned to me, he said, you need someone to call to cover your ass when shit goes down. And the problem is that in cloud, no one can hear you scream. So when your database starts having 4 orders of magnitude behavior differences and you start waving your hands, there's no one that can hear you scream, and you're out there alone. And that's why people are leaving. This is an example on a graph of the pain. So here's kind of read-write latency for a cloud read versus kind of a standard RAID array in a server in a data center. And what you'll see is that cloud actually does pretty good at some times. But when it starts going crazy, there's nothing you can do about it because there's no tier to upgrade to in Amazon. You get what you get, and good luck. You can go on their support forums, etc. I would ask you to go out, if you're interested in this, and go read their case study written by Amazon on SharePoint. And does anyone use SharePoint out here? Can I get hands, people that use SharePoint? It's fairly ubiquitous, right? It's a pretty standard IT app. I think Microsoft has a $2 billion business on it now. Their white paper on SharePoint said, we actually don't recommend using SharePoint on EBS. At the end of a 10-page white paper. You could tell that they got the assignment, go write this white paper on how to use SharePoint. We got to go get this market. And at the end, in small print, it says, we're asking for higher performance. We need it. We can't use it. And the reason is this. So you can't load up a highly relational database on that kind of performance. So how does that happen? It happens because everything shares 3 points of contention. You've got to get the I/O in and out of the hypervisor, and Xen is frankly not as good as I/O as VMware is. So that's a starting point. It's just not. Go look at the benchmarks, left, right, up, down. In fact, I met Josh here, and he's one of the founders of OpenStack, the founder of OpenStack, whatever you want to say. And the reason I met him, he gave a talk, and he said, I can't get enough bits in and out of Xen, actually. It's a true story, right? That was the first conversation I ever had with him. So first, you got to get in and out of the hypervisor. Second, you have to get across a really cheap network. So you have no network control. And then third is you've got to get it in and out of what is presumably a JBOD array of disks. So you got 3 points where I/O can just traffic jam. And that's why you get those 5 orders of magnitude spikes in performance that doesn't work for databases. So uptime, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of uptime. I think people are becoming more familiar with the fact that everything is ephemeral in a lot of the popular clouds. It just comes, it goes. And I think people were okay with that. What they weren't okay with was some of the 2 or 3 day outages that happen. I don't mean to beat up on that, but I think when those happen, what I do at VMware is I do business development for Cloud Foundry. So I talk to tons of partners, tons of applications. And what happens during a cloud outage is they all call us. And they say, crap, we don't have another cloud. We need another cloud pronto. Our customers are killing us. And so every outage that happens, people realize that the future is multi-cloud because there's no one that hears them scream. They have no one else to turn to. So this is another Mathew's deft way of saying that you need an SLA, or you need some way of getting performance out of your provider, and you need some repercussions if you can't get it. And that doesn't work in a one-provider system. The other thing that a one-provider system that we have had the last couple years in cloud does is it disincentivizes people to do aggressive price cuts. So one of the huge marketing messages that came out around cloud maybe 2 years ago, has anyone ever heard of say cloud is commodity, right? Have we heard, hand up if you've heard cloud is commodity. Commodity pricing. Have we heard this message? It's gotten quieter. Does anyone know how much RAM has gone down in price and cost the last year? Any guess? Throw a number out. 30%? Yeah, the number is 27%. So you can look at a RAM index company out there, and they'll show you the nice graph of how it's gone down. Do you know how much on average, say, a large relational data RDS service or a large instance on EC2 has gone down in the last year? 0. The year before that, also 0. So the other repercussion of a single provider system is that all of the liabilities accrue to the users because they get I/O contention, and all of the benefits accrue to the provider. They get to set pricing because there's no one else there. Until you can have multi-cloud, you're not going to really have leverage. So we think, and we are executing and doing really well right now with the story that we can solve these problems. So we've got some pretty good engineers who've taken a look at the I/O issue, and they've done two things. One is they've improved the I/O performance in the hypervisor. This is why we're growing as fast as we are, is because people trust us to do real I/O. You can actually have what would be like a real server performance on VMware. That's our really bread and butter. That's why we're as successful as we are, is people trust their real apps to us, not just their new cloud apps with multi-tenancy and embarrassingly parallel. And then the second thing is, in addition to the hypervisor I/O, we also have I/O the whole way to the storage controller to make sure that not one VM hogs it all. So we've really taken a look at that at the technology level, and we solve that with engineering. The other thing you can do is you can have multiple providers. So we have 40 vCloud powered providers today. And what that means is that someone can hear you scream. So if you have a problem with one of them and they're using really cheap storage or they're not doing well for you, you can pick up your VM exactly as it exists with a product called vCloud Connector and move it to somebody else. Maybe a half-hour migration. So that gives you an idea that you can have multiple storage options, not just any color you want as long as it's black. If you want to work with someone that has Fusion I/O high-performance storage, you could get that. And then enforce CPU and I/O reservations and load balance. Has anyone ever looked at a small or a micro instance on Amazon and looked at how much memory stealing, how much CPU stealing is going on? How much is there, Josh? All of it, right? Just compile something on it sometime. And you'll see that you have more waiting room than CPU. So we've taken a look at that. The other thing then, this is an example of a noisy neighbor. So he's stealing all of the I/O to your storage. And this means that your SharePoint is dying. All your users are filing trouble tickets. They can't get what they want. They can't interact. It just feels bad. Productivity is plummeting. We intervene and say, actually, we're going to partition out that throughput and make sure that everyone gets what they were allocated. And that's really important because applications tend to be bursty, and cloud doesn't work unless you can stop certain people from bursting into your SLA. Ooh, there's a graphic. The bits are flowing well. The other thing is network portability and security. So if you've instantiated a more complex network that your enterprise IT apps require, say Windows Discovery Service where you need layer 2 connectivity, you can do that in a vCloud, and you can have layer 2 connectivity, and you can encapsulate that as a description, and you can move that to other clouds and get the same network. So you can have exactly what you want versus any color you want as long as it's black. So in addition to multi-cloud choice, we have multi-networking options. So here's a little bit of the secret sauce that has been really, really popular. I think the last time I talked to Matthew, there was tens and tens of thousands of customers using this and trying it out. I'd encourage you to. How many people have vSphere today? A good number. It's got a high market share. vCloud Connector plugs into vSphere, and it allows you to migrate VMs to the cloud or back. So you can take a VM that you have, send it to one of the vCloud providers as it is with its requirements, and go. And what that creates is much more of a market system where there's not a single provider. And it's very easy of use for cloud migration. High ease of use. Finally, security. Role-based access controls, which has now been implemented in a few other clouds. We've done this pretty well. And you can say to all of your workers, you get this level of control, this level of control, this level of control. You can instantiate from a catalog. You can you're allowed to move this, you're allowed to change network settings, and we've got a full fine-grained control there, which all enterprises want and need, that a lot of clouds don't provide out of the box. So here's the punchline. It's not expensive. So you're able to get these benefits at a price that is shockingly similar to what you might call the quote-unquote commodity clouds. And the reason is that we have a competitive market. There's a reason, there's people out there who are vying for your business. And as those RAM prices go down and as storage prices go down every year, they have both the means and the incentive to deliver those benefits to you. So this is really more of a long-term strategic decision. If you're deciding on a cloud architecture, you want to pick a software layer that is portable so that you can pick different providers. If you don't, if you lock yourself into a Hotel California cloud, you will get pricing cuts and price help when they want to give it to you. That may be 3-4 years from now before they decide to change. It may never happen. So this is one of the biggest myths of commodity clouds, is that they're somehow more cheaper than things with good enterprise features. That might have been the case very, very early on, and it's no longer the case. So this is one of my favorite slides. The other thing is, when you think about price and cost, is that people are getting pretty expensive. So I've been trying to hire lately in the Valley, and I haven't found it too cheap. Josh, you have a startup. Is it easy to hire these days?
I hire people in Canada and bring them down.
Yeah, so people are expensive. So when your database is floundering or you can't get the performance you need from your network, that means that someone's dinner is being interrupted and their wife's upset, or maybe their husband, and they're working on it. And they're way more expensive than an incremental 3% or 4% or whatever you might want for extra in a cloud. So I'd really encourage you to think about the real human cost of low performance and what that does to your organization, both from the end users consuming the apps and the people administrating the apps. That's probably one of the biggest hits in cost of cloud right now, and why the majority of enterprise applications still run on normal environments. So if you want to learn more, if you want to see this world of multi-cloud providers that give you someplace to turn to get choice, I encourage you to go out to vcloud.vmware.com, and we have a portal here where there are 40 vCloud-powered partners. Anywhere from vCloud Data Center, which is a pretty high-end offering that we have that's highly specified by VMware, to vCloud Powered, which is anyone who instantiates the vCloud API, thus giving the portability with vCloud Connector. So go out and check these guys out, or this page out, and you can get all of the resources you need to get started, including test drive. So you could go out today, and several of these people offer test drives. You can go in right away. So in summary, our quick, tight message is that the future is about multi-cloud. And the reason is that you're going to need choice in order to get performance. And you don't have to settle for the black car anymore. That was a great way to launch an industry, but it's not the future. And if anyone asks you about that, have them look at companies like Urban Airship, or have them look at the latest high-end companies and what they're doing and saying, as these new thought leaders in technology are abandoning this system, that means we need to start to think about that too, because a year from now, that's going to be at this conference. People are going to be talking about it. So just giving you a little bit of a view into the future. So here's what we have stuck up around the office. If your apps are facing performance problems, keep calm, vCloud on. Thanks.
We have time for questions. If you can bear to take questions even though you're only the buddy, let's just see. Who would like to take advantage of VMware's presence in this room? Remember, I can only just barely see past the lights. Here he comes. Hang on.
So how do you guys see OpenStack as a competitor or a threat, whatever you call it?
Open that can of
And I mean, do you see that the perils there, that there will be many, several more actually cloud providers using OpenStack? You are throwing some numbers like 40 right now on vCloud.
Yeah.
So how do you see that? Like,
Josh, how many OpenStack providers are live today? So my answer is that I've heard of OpenStack. I know about it. I'm friends with its founder. I've been talking to him throughout the presentation, so I'm pretty aware with it. I think open source is a great thing. I work on Cloud Foundry at VMware, which is all about open source. If you look at the actual number of live clouds that are running, that are available, that are connected, I think we still have a very big lead in that ecosystem. But I do think it's worth noting that it is a trend towards multi-cloud. So I think that project exists because people want choice. So I think it actually supports some of the themes I'm talking about. Whether or not they'll be able to execute is I think, still a very largely undecided question.
nothing to do with OpenStack. I just thought it was elegant that you used Adrian's quote, and Adrian is, of course, the original AWS evangelist, to argue against AWS. That was subtle and elegant. So.
Well, this is a great point, because Adrian was at a conference today, and someone said to him, hey, we're just a mid-sized company. We can't hire the best Java engineers in the world to optimize our app for AWS. He's like, how do you give us advice to hire the rock stars you need to make it work? And he goes, you can't. So, I mean, I think it's a little disingenuous. He's like, use cloud, but you need the best rock star engineers in the world to do it. And most of American corporations aren't able to, kind of have that's why Adrian's out at conferences all the time, is recruiting.
So how does VMware make money off this? I mean, you were talking about third parties that people are paying money to. What are the economics for VMware?
Sure. So we have a program called VSPP, which is our way of enabling cloud providers with VMware. And if you look at VSPP pricing for clouds, you'll find it's pretty aggressive and pretty competitive. In fact, a lot of my friends, I've got a lot of cloud friends, and they all said to me, I'll just tell you guys to keep it in the room. They came to me back channel, and they're like, screw your new VSPP pricing, it's so good. Because a lot of people were trying to kind of make an entry level, kind of underneath us and find a cheaper price point. But it's amazing when you take the best technology out there and you give it an aggressive price in cloud and you make it pay per use. That's why we have so many partners. So the great thing about being a software company is that you have a pretty low cost of goods sold, so you can meet the market where you need to. So we're making good money off of it, and we're able to get people going. I mean, it's easy to get started because you pay as your users consume it. So you pay per month per gigabyte of RAM is the way it works.
Next question out there. I can see, but I have to scan. Here we are.
They don't want me to go home.
Short, sharp, and shiny questions. Encouraged.
I was wondering if you were involved in Cloud Foundry, and I know it's in the very early stages. Cloud Foundry in terms of how it's, what kind of pricing structure is going to be around Cloud Foundry.
Yeah, so my full-time day job is head of business development and partner development for Cloud Foundry. So that's my day job. Has everyone heard of Cloud Foundry?
Show of hands.
Hands for me? Yeah. Sweet. Has anyone tried it? We all have accounts?
Actually, that's a little problem is a lot of people are having trouble getting invitation codes. Even the promotion code that the Cloud Expo 2011.
Yeah.
All it does is come back with an email saying, "Thanks, we'll get back to you later."
Yeah, so right now we have a batch approval process. So we got so many requests to get into Cloud Foundry that it doesn't just immediately give you an account, because we were getting multiple thousands a day of incoming requests for accounts. And so it's somewhat throttled, but it's usually right now, I think the approval process is less than 24 hours. If you guys don't get that, email me, jwaters@VMware. I'll get you in. That's 2 T's in Waters, just so you know. But there shouldn't be a problem. I look at the usual signups per day and the amount of accounts given out, and it's been steady. They're all the same, so no one should be waiting too long.
Okay.
When we first launched, we had a 3-week gap where we couldn't keep up with demand.
Can I ask one more question? Okay.
Please go ahead.
And you asked about pricing. We've announced
pricing.
nothing on pricing, so I can't talk about that.
You can't talk because the big issue is, I and a number of other people maybe in this room have used Google App Engine, which is probably the first real
And what did that single provider do? So what happened? Does everyone know how Google App Engine ended as a story? Pricing went up by 5 to 10x.
Well, yeah, and well, the other problem too is that the pricing was so crude. You got lured in, and you thought you built a nice prototype, and it looked great. And then when you scaled up, you got this incredible sticker shock because you had no control over how it was being managed.
Yeah.
So it was great getting started and getting up in the cloud, and then all of a sudden when you start getting serious traffic, it's like, oh my God, and so you just basically I know they've gotten better, but it's still, they give you very little control.
No, cloud monoculture will not work long term. This is another example of it, and it's the reason Cloud Foundry is open source. and it's the reason I spend my time helping enable other people to build Cloud Foundry solutions. So say in the unlikely event that you didn't like VMware's pricing that we come out with for Cloud Foundry, we have partners that offer it based on our open source, and they're free to do so. So the same bits that run cloudfoundry.com, that you actually deploy your code to and that manages your code, are available in open source. The exact same ones that's running all of those applications today. So we have partner AppFog, which was PHP Fog, and they have a full Cloud Foundry stack on Amazon now that they host, and they're going to probably have public pricing before us. We actually have a demo that we haven't released yet that shows one app being deployed to 10 different partner clouds of Cloud Foundry all at once with the same command. So, I think pricing is, it's going to be what it is, but you're going to have tons of options, and you're not going to have to modify your application or your training of your people to get there.
Okay, thank
Any
you.
final questions before I can see arms? It's amazing how many people reach for their ears or the back of their head when we ask this question. In which case, why don't we say thank you in the time-honored fashion to James Waters?